Hey everyone, Vamps here, and today we're going to do the first War Stories. So, War Stories is basically going to be a section where I talk about my old games, and we just sort of have fun and hopefully learn something during the time period as well. So basically, in War Stories, I'll be covering certain games, and with those games, I will release subsequent reviews, but they'll be shorter reviews. I'm going to call them retro reviews, and they should be pretty straightforward, but they'll cover the bulk of the rules. So in these videos, I'll just be covering the rules as they pop up throughout the game. Today's game is going to be Pirates, and it's a collector card game, but what you could do is with the cards, you pop the ships out and you build them. So, and everything that you needed came in a pack. So you got your measuring stick and your dice and all that kind of stuff. Everything came straightforward in the pack. So today's story is called Play the Opponent, Not the Game. So before I jump straight into the Pirates section of the video, I first have to talk about MechWarrior, but in particular one player. And I know what you're thinking, don't you mean Battletech Vamps? No, so at this time there was another MechWarrior game called MechWarrior The Dark Age, and basically it's kind of like a mix between MechWarrior and Warhammer. But I'm not going to go in great detail on this because what we're actually talking about is a dude called Larry. Larry was an interesting character, guys. He, how do I put it nicely? He was a complete dick. And yeah, that's me putting it nicely. He didn't like to lose. He was a poor loser. He was a poor winner. And he threw temper tantrums when things didn't go his way. Generally, they were minor temper tantrums, but lots of stomping and storming around and all this kind of stuff. You might be thinking that how come Larry didn't end up unpopular in the Wargaming Club? Well, he kind of did, to be completely honest. Basically, only the MechWarrior guys played with him, and no one else really had much interest in him. He played Magic as well, but he very rarely got a game because no one was interested in his crap. And even in the MechWarrior group, he wasn't very well liked. He had one exception, his best buddy Greg, and I felt sorry for Greg because most of the time he seemed to just follow Larry around and put fires out. He was a good wargamer as well, though. He was probably better than Larry, but he spent most of his time just making sure that Larry didn't do stupid shit. Also, the other thing is that at least in MechWarrior, Larry was a point cheat. In MechWarrior, generally, your army would be 2 mechs, 2 tanks, 2 units of infantry. Generally, Larry would rock up with 3 mechs, 2 tanks, and 3 units of infantry. And I know what you're thinking, why didn't anyone call him out on this? I don't know. I mean, I can tell you why I didn't. I was 12, 13 at the time. I wasn't calling a 30-year-old man out for cheating. But no one else did either, even though we were all very certain he was cheating. So, what ended up happening is that the Pirates tournament rolled around, which you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with MechWarrior? Well, the MechWarrior group was the ultimate wargaming group, basically. So, Pirates was their next game. So, what ended up happening is the local game store, a guy who was run by a guy called Tony. Tony decided to run a tournament in the local gaming group, which was ran by a guy from Texas, no joke, Texas guy in Australia, who I'm going to call Walker. Even if I said his real name, I don't think you'd believe me anyway, so I'm just going to call him Walker, just for the ease of it. So Walker was a really cool guy. He ran the local gaming group, and Tony ran the local gaming club, and Walker had Tony come in and do tournaments, because Tony was very official. So the only time Larry didn't cheat at MechWarrior would be at these tournaments, because Tony was very thorough. But anyway, he announced a Pirates tournament. Now, on paper, it wasn't overly exciting. Not anyone was really super duper excited for it. There were about 16 players because there were 4 extra from another group. And everyone was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess I'll join the tournament. And then Tony goes, oh, by the way, guys, just for the record, the tournament prizes are a tin, which no one was really interested in, a promo ship, which we knew about the promo ship. It wasn't a very good ship. No one was excited about that. But the big news is that it'd be 3 of the new booster packs that had not been released in Australia yet. So at this point, Australia was still behind people in wargaming. And what happened is that even though we had Pirates, we were about 3 months behind, roughly. So these new packs weren't scheduled to be released until next month. But WizKids had sent him a prize pack with these new packs in. So everyone was super excited about getting this particular prize. And it even got to the point that some people didn't even care if they won. They just wanted to see the packs being opened, as long as they were part of the action. So, basically with Pirates, there's 2 ways to win the game. The first one is to just sink the enemy fleet, which was the meta option at this point. So, sink the enemy fleet, meta option. The other one is to collect all the gold coins, and whoever has the most gold coins at the end of the game wins. That's basically how Pirates was played. So the tournament had a couple of additional rules. Tony put a time limit on the amount of turns, so you can only have 20 turns, which sounds like a lot, but it isn't, because most fleets were 2 ships. And so we had a time limit of 20 turns, and obviously the general win conditions. We also had 7 neutral islands, because each person has a home island, and each of them would have 3 coins, each 21, and the total of those 21 coins would be 50. Now, the way you get the total is you flip the coin over, and it's got a number on the back. So, you know, nothing too crazy so far. So it could be number 1 to 6. Obviously, if you get 6, that's really good. And so we went on with the tournament. The first 2 rounds to me are non-issue. The first guy foolishly tried to play for coins. I had two ships, 2 large ships. So it was large, medium, and small. Small had 2 sails. Large had 3 sails. Medium had 3 sails. Large had 4 sails. And that was also the number of attacks you got. So sails were simultaneously your health and your attacks. So I had 2 large ships. I was playing the pirate faction, which were kind of like the mercenary faction, and then there was British, France, Spanish, and Dutch. Most people just played pirates because they just had the best ships. So I had 2 ships, the Hargebringer and the Revenant, which were the 2 best pirate ships at the time. The Hargebringer was just really strong. Its special ability was it counted as having a captain. Now, captain is important in the game because a captain lets you move and shoot in the same turn instead of just move or shoot. And the other one was the Revenant, which let you move through enemy ships and islands. So I went in, each ship had a captain, and then the Hargebringer had an extra buff that I took as well. So everything goes swimmingly until the semi-finals, because there were 16 of us, so there were 4 matches. 4 matches for the winner, sorry. And so I got to the semi-finals, and I was up against Greg. And as I said, Greg was a cool guy, no problem. And he was doing this new meta-defining thing, because the meta at the time was take 2 large ships and destroy the enemy fleet. So he was doing this meta thing at the time where he took a large, a medium, and a small ship. Interesting, I thought to myself. And it turns out it had been working. The problem was at this point, no one really knew the whole entire Pirates roster. It was rare to pull rarer ships. And so we knew that the Revenant existed, but only 2 people in the club actually had one. I was one, and we'll get to the other one shortly. And so he didn't know what the Revenant's ability was. So he tries to block the Revenant with his small ship to then team up on my other ship. But I just sail straight through his ship and boom. At that point, it was done. I took out his medium and severely damaged his large ship, and at that point he knew it was over and he forfeited. Which was a shame because he was a good player. So the finals came in. So the finals of any tournament at the gaming club were played in the kitchenette. So the kitchenette was kind of like it was a kitchen basically. It was a small room with a decent sized table. But there was like a cafeteria style window that looked out into the rest of the gaming club. So anyone could look in and see what was going on in the kitchenette. Sometimes they served food out of it. But most of the time, it was more of a viewing platform for finals, if they were happening. So I walk in, and Tony's in there, and I notice that my opponent is not in there, and I'm like, who's my opponent? And Tony's like, I'm not 100% sure yet. It's between your dad and Larry. And I'm like, okay. Now I knew who I'd be facing at this point. My dad was not the greatest wargamer. So I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be fighting Larry, but I was hoping I'd be fighting my dad, because then it didn't matter. We'd share the prize, basically. But I knew Larry was going to walk through the door, and lo and behold, in he walks, Larry, with his douchebaggy face, and he was an unpleasant guy. He's like got that shitting grin on, he's like... And at this point, I had not beaten Larry at all, ever. So Larry must have walked in, he must have been so unbelievably confident about his victory. So he sits down at the table, and Tony goes back over the comp rules again, and I'm like, great, no worries. So we look at each other, and I look at Larry's ships, and Larry has got the Revenant as well, but he was playing British. He's got the HMS Bounty. I believe that's what it was called. The HMS Bounty, same ability as the Harshbringer, sorry. So it counts having a captain even when it doesn't have one, and its sails were slightly altered. So, it's just repositioned. If the Harshbringer had his better sails on the inside, the Bounty had them on the outside, basically, was what it was. The game begins. We both look at each other and both like, and we go and collect coins. It was weird. But so we knew that whoever got the first shot off was going to win. And we had equal teams. So that first engagement was omni-important. Yeah, omni-important. So we go around, we collect all the coins, and we head towards the middle island. Now, Larry had initiative, so he was going first. So Larry's trying to decide how he's approaching this island. And he's like, like he wants to make the perfect move, and he's taking ages. So I'm a bit bored. I'm 13. So I decide to look at my coins. And I count them. And I'm like, oh, that can't be right. So I count them again. 30. 30 out of 50, guys. Which means I'm currently winning. Meanwhile, Larry is Zach Galifianakis it. The maths is flying in his head. Maths is all flying in his head. And he finally makes his move. And so we I approach the island, and I'm like, I don't need to attack him. I don't need to move into his range and let him blow me apart, right? Just to get the chance of maybe doing the same in return. I'm currently winning. I have no problem waiting until Larry makes a mistake. Hopefully. Or we run the clock out. I want that win, guys. I want those pirate cards. So we do the dance. So this is a sort of military term where you move your guys backwards and forwards until you find a good position. So we're at about turn 8 when we rocked up to the island. We're still dancing at turn 11. Neither of us wants to move in. That's pretty much how it works. I don't want to move in. Larry doesn't want to move in. But I look over and Larry is seething, guys. He's sitting there. He's like, so I'm looking at him like, oh my god, he's getting frustrated. I'm like, oh, maybe I can force him to make a mistake. And guess what, guys? Turn 12. He almost makes a mistake. Yeah, sorry. So what happens is that it's kind of like chess. Once you let go of the piece, it's moved. Particularly in a tournament. But he moved he moved his ship forward, and he's like, oh, I think that's in range of your guys. And I'm like, yeah, I think you might be right there. Mind you, keep in mind, he doesn't say it like that. He goes, I think I'm in range of your guys. Like, he's not a happy chappy at this point. So he makes a half move instead of a full move. And he passes the turn back over to me, which I also make a positional move. So we get to turn 14, and once again, no one has made this move. Larry is now angry. And I thought maybe he looked at his coins, maybe he realized he was losing. But no, he never once looked at his coins throughout the whole entire match. He never even checked them. He never knew he was losing. He just wanted to blow me up, and he wanted me to move in. But now he's like getting, he's at the angry point now, guys. He is absolutely looking like a madman at this point. I look at him and I'm like, oh jeez, he is getting really angry. And I look at Tony, who doesn't even look at me. He's watching Larry like seethe, basically. So turn 14, so he's taking his move. I make my move, and at the end of turn 14, he's shaking like a goddamn paint mixer. He's like, he's just going. He's gone at this point. I'm not even sure if he's aware of his surroundings. He's staring daggers directly at me, and I'm 13. This guy's 30. I'm now starting to feel like I'm in danger, right? And then Tony, who looks concerned now, he goes, guys. So he interrupts. Now, he was doing this on purpose. Every 5 turns, he was going to tell us that, it was turn 5, it was turn 10, turn 15, and then when we got to 18, it was 2 turns left, 1 turn left, last turn, game over. So that we were aware of where we were in the game. So he goes, it's turn 15, and I don't know what the G word was going to be. Guys, Gulliver, Gallivant, Guinan. I have no clue, guys. Because as he goes, Larry shoots up out of his chair. The chair falls over behind him. He slaps his hands down on the table. Now, the kitchenette table was quite sturdy. It was much sturdier than every other table in the place. So he slaps his hands down. He's like, fine. Now, at this point, everyone in the club is looking into the kitchenette because Larry is screaming. And he moves his ships forward into the spot where I can move then shoot. And he goes, "You happy? You happy now, you little freak? You're gonna win. I'm sure you feel great, you champion. You're such a champion with your cheap little delay tactics. Well, your majesty, I hope you enjoy your little crown." And mind you, I'm back here, but he's like this in my face. He's leant over the table. He's over the top of me. And I honestly thought he was about to hit me. Now, I was a black belt in martial art at this point, but I'm sitting in a chair holding a plastic card. I am not ready for a rumble under any circumstances. So I'm like, oh my god, I'm about to get punched by an adult. And then so he spins around and he storms out. And everyone watches him as he walks, he storms across the room. He damn near rips the door off the hinges and he slams it behind him. And then everyone slowly goes from the door back to the kitchenette looking at me. I'm wordless. I don't really know how else to describe it. And Tony is also wordless. So so my eyes move from the crowd and I just stare where Larry was sitting. And I go, "Tony, what do I do?" And he goes, "Take your turn and I'll witness it." So I take my turn. Now, mind you, this felt like it was 4 or 5 minutes, but it probably was only about a minute of time. So I move my guys in. I blow his fleet away. I sink one of them, severely damage the other. And Tony's like, "I'm just going to go talk to him." And he gets up and walks out. Now I look out into the area, and everyone is just sort of frozen. people are holding magic cards. They're mid-deck shuffle. Someone's holding like a Space Marine just up in front of his face. It's like time had literally frozen in the room. It was crazy. There was only one person who didn't have this aghast look on their face, and that was Walker. Walker looked pissed. And as I found out later, he had that, mile-long stare. So it looked like he was looking at me pissed. And I'm like, oh, what, did I do something wrong? This is my first tournament. I had no clue. I'm like, did I break some type of rule? I didn't realize that you weren't allowed to stall. Anyway, Tony walks back in and he's like, congratulations, Larry has forfeited. I'll just gather everything and we'll have a quick ceremony. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no worries. And it's like everything started moving again at that point. And I looked over at Walker, and Walker actually noticed I was looking at him this time. And he like smiles and thumbs up. And I'm like, oh, cool. I don't think he's upset with me. So that was good. And so Tony does the ceremony. And Walker, as the ceremony ends, which was just like, here, Vamps won, here's his prize, great stuff. I see Walker walk outside. So I'm like, okay, cool, no worries. And I go back in with Tony because he was organising a Magic tournament. And I'm like, did I do something wrong, Tony? And he's like, rules-wise, no. He's like, but I do think it was a bit of a cheap tactic. You should have just taken your medicine, is what he said to me. And I'm like, but I wanted to win the tournament, though. If I had have sailed in, I would have just lost. And I was like, and I was winning on gold coins, so I really didn't want to engage. Like, yeah, but there's a bit of etiquette between wargamers. You don't really, you don't do that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, look, don't feel too bad about it. Just remember it for next time. And I'm like, okay. He's like, by the way, Larry's outburst was completely unreasonable, just for the record. He should not have done that. I told him so, and I have warned him that if he ever does it again, I will be banning him from any future tournaments. And I'm like, okay, great. So I walk out of the kitchenette, and Walker approaches me, and he's like, hey, buddy. And I'm like, hi, Walker. And he's like, look, I don't know what anyone else has told you, but I just want to let you know that you did nothing wrong. You played within the rules of the game, and if Larry can't handle that, that's his issue. He's like, I have told him that if he ever has an outburst like that, he is banned from the club permanently. And he's like, but just so you know, congratulations on your win. You earned it. That it's a strategy to wait for your opponent. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, seriously, don't worry about people calling it a cheap strategy or anything. In a tournament, anything goes. As long as it's legal, of course. And then he chuckled and he walked off. And that was about it for that particular brand of story. So, what happened between Larry and myself? Well, Larry basically avoided me after that. He wouldn't play any regular games with me. And funnily enough, whenever we met in a tournament, I beat him every time. It's like I'd put a brick wall in his mind when it came to me. He just wouldn't play me. And whenever he did play me in tournaments, he would lose. In any game. I never used to beat him in MechWarrior. In tournaments, I started beating him in MechWarrior. To the point, Larry would make sure that I wasn't going to be sort of near him in the bracket. Because he really didn't want to fight me. So that was fun. Tony's store eventually went out. Once some new gaming stores popped in. And yeah, you might be thinking, what did your dad do? If that was my kid, I would have gone nuts on the person. Yeah, my dad wasn't really that kind of person. He told me, which I still am doubtful on, that he went and talked to Tony, which, what would that have done? Tony wasn't the one who went nuts. Larry was. And Larry continued to be a fixture in the gaming club. But eventually, he really couldn't find a game very often outside of the MechWarrior group. He certainly wasn't playing Magic, and he wasn't very good at Warhammer. He played it a couple times, but no one wanted to play against him because they would make reference to his temper tantrums, basically. So that's it. Hopefully, you've learnt that playing the player is just as effective as playing the game. Just remember, don't deliberately upset someone. If your strategy annoys them and they make a mistake, that's fine. If you give them wet willies across the table or start licking their miniatures and they get upset from that, that's not good. Don't do that. Frustrate them with tactics, not with antics. So for my next war story, I'm going to actually leave it up to you guys. I'm going to put up a little poll, but feel free to put your suggestion in the comments. So we've got two options. Option 1, we've got a Warhammer story where you shouldn't underestimate your opponent. And then we've got a Mech Warrior the Dark Age story featuring Larry, so the second Larry story. And this one will be based around sometimes luck works out in people's favor. Or you can't beat luck might be the better version of the story. So we've got don't underestimate your opponent and don't beat luck. Which one would you guys like to hear? Leave a thing in the comments. I will put a poll up on all my social media and stuff like that. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you on the next one. Whether that be stream, major video, or another minor video like this one. You have a good one. See yous.